Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to talk about burnout. Sorry, we just had a little bit of technical difficulties. Thank you for joining us again. We're going to get Sue Tan up here on stage and get started diving into this. All right, there we go. Anything. All right, hopefully we'll see her shortly. Really grateful to be talking about burnout today. Oh, hi, Sue. Yay. It worked out. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Talk about stress. Can I take some cannabinoids?
I know. Shall we start with the dose?
Thank you to our friends who are dedicated and joined again. I'm glad everyone found us. That's so good. Good to
Heather,
see you.
thank you for saving the day. You all probably don't need to know this, but I had no live button on my phone for some reason. So Heather has saved the day to make this possible and get us on the screen.
Happy to help.
So, thanks to everybody who's tuning in. It's been a long, long time since we've done one of these, live conversations, these polite conversations. So, I'm so excited to get back into it. Heather has been an amazing resource and a super boost to how we do education at Polite. And so today is just one of the many topics that she's been helping us do deep dives into. But to back up a little bit, for those of you who are new to the world of Polite, we are a local Seattle-based business, and we focus on creating formulations that are based on the power of natural herbs and plants, with the star being cannabinoids like CBD, CBG, CBN, and little nice amounts of THC when when it's helpful. And we believe not just in creating formulations that are actually, effective and that really give people support, but also the education that needs to come with it, because so little is known about a lot of the therapeutic and kind of practical aspects of using cannabinoids for everyday life and for health and wellness. So, I'm Sue. I'm one of the co-founders of Polite, and then I'll give Heather a chance to introduce her amazing background that blends, education, cannabis, health, holistic health. But today we are here to have a conversation about burnout, both from kind of a personal experience perspective, but also sharing a lot of the things that Heather did a deep dive into this month, actually for the past, many, many months, that hopefully can help everybody understand how to recognize it in ourselves. And there's a lot of things we can't control in life, but, there are things that we can. And so to get into that toolkit of things that we actually have agency over. So with that, Heather, do you mind giving everybody a brief introduction of yourself?
No, and thank you so much for a great intro. So, like Sue said, my name's Heather Dagley. I'm a holistic wellness coach, and I'm trained as a certified cannabis coach. So I've been working in the cannabis wellness space for, gosh, about 6 years now. Crazy to say. And I'm really interested in sharing any and all holistic and natural ways that people can improve their health and vitality. And I'm lucky enough to also be Polite's community wellness educator. So I work with Sue, and we put out blogs and educational campaigns, and I get to go to some of their vendor booths and things. So it's all about engagement with the community, talking about wellness, making sure that people have practical information about Polite products, but also about cannabinoids, herbs, and all these holistic ways that people really can improve their health and move the needle. So I'm really excited to be here talking about burnout today, because we were thinking about, what's going to be relevant to people in the fall. Summer's over, moving into fall. People have a lot going on. And I know burnout and stress is like something that I have experienced so deeply in my own life and career. And I know I'm not alone. This is so pervasive in our culture today and just modern living. There's a lot of greats to it, but it can have this externality of really feeling stressed out. So just grateful to be here and share some tips, hopefully that will help you improve your own life.
And I think if you're an adult and you haven't experienced burnout yet, first of all, congratulations, but I think that's pretty rare. And so hopefully this is relevant to, a lot of us. And as a caveat, Heather and I are not here today to speak from like some mountaintop on the other side. It's still something we both always talk about, always give each other grace for, even as we work together. And so I think it's a constant thing we all have to work at. You're never kind of like totally in the clear. But hopefully the hope is you become more aware of the signs and you recognize them earlier on, so it doesn't create kind of long-term health harm, that it often does. So I think to kick us off, I was thinking about and we'll get into this as a first theme, but there's being tired and exhausted and stressed, and then there's burnout, right? And so um I was thinking about as a grown up, when is the first time I had my like burnout aha, of like, I've been stressed before, but this feels more serious. This feels more sometimes helpless, and so for me, ironically, I think starting this business, we've been at it for almost 6 years now, and I think in the beginning, at the beginning of anything, whether it's a job or a project, you have kind of like a natural enthusiasm and adrenaline, and you're all in to kind of get this thing going. But I could recognize that by well into year two, and of course with COVID happening during the beginning of this business, I started to feel like every morning was like this fire hose that I was just like struggling to manage. And that, the last, when you try to sleep, all you can think of is all the things that you haven't done yet, and then when you wake up, or you start to kind of try to wake up earlier and earlier to feeling like that maybe gives you more time in the day. But it's just never enough. And you start to just, uh, well, first of all, your body, you start to have illness, you start to not feel good, you start, for some, they actually fall sick, for some, it's just more emotional. But I think year two, I could really tell that, something is not right here. And there's like a misery that you feel, and just never feeling like you can catch up to anything. And I think that's compounded when you're responsible for, other people in your life, whether it's like caregiving or parents or children or pets or loved ones, and that becomes like another dimension of feeling burnout and that you can't keep up. And so on that note, for you, like when was maybe one of the first times or a very distinct time in your life where you're like, oh, this is not normal. I'm going through something, that is beyond just exhaustion and stress.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing. And I find that very relatable. I have a bigger example, but I'll say like entrepreneurship in general. And that's a big classification in doing this research of people that are facing burnout. So I resonate with that as an entrepreneur myself. There can be those days where you're like, I just haven't stopped and there's so much more to do. So that's a big burnout burner. For me, in terms of like when I first really recognized burnout in myself was in my mid 20s. I had been working, it was more of a traditional work model. Before I entered the cannabis wellness space, I was working a corporate job, a traditional 9 to 5 in a beautiful office building. But I was thinking about it. It was like it was a 6 to 4 oftentimes. I'd get into the office early. I would take work home with me. I had a laptop, which was great for access, but kind of helped erode some of those work-life boundaries. And I really was hitting that that point of burnout. It was beyond exhaustion. I could take a whole weekend to rest between Friday and Monday, and I'd still come back Monday and feel very depleted.
Yeah.
And so I internalized like that a lot of this is maybe there's something wrong with me. There's something that I'm not handling well about work. Other people might be fine, and I'm struggling. And I good employee and showed up with gusto every day, but behind the scenes I was struggling, overeating, over drinking, overspending, just trying to kind of dissociate from this burnout and feel some relief, and it wasn't quite coming. So the real kicker for me was, unfortunately, in the bathroom one day, I didn't even know who it was, but I heard another woman crying, and it really was like this wake up call to me, like, oh my gosh, this isn't just me that's
Yeah.
struggling with this is pervasive, and maybe it's
Mhm.
this environment, maybe it's that's not really conducive to human thriving. So ever since
Mhm.
then, I've really been on a bent of like, there's got to be another way.
Mhm.
How can we help people thrive and be prosperous too? But we're a finite resource as humans. We've got to like take care of ourselves, tend to ourselves
Yeah.
in this world. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I was thinking about this morning was that sometimes conversations around wellness and things like burnout, they can become about like privilege and like, well, you know, who doesn't want to be well rested and who doesn't want to be stressed, but there's like a reality to like what it takes to survive, and cost of living, and having a job, having all these responsibilities. And so I think sometimes people kind of, I don't know, it's not cynical, but there can be like a, well, do I have a choice? And I think a lot of the things we discussed was there's a point where your body will not give you a choice anymore,
Yes.
and that regardless of the reality of your life, it's just not sustainable, right? And so it becomes almost a duty to ourselves, to our own, to our body, and to being able to actually remain functional, remain uh, um, active in life, where if you don't stop and think about it and unpack it and explore, what are the things I can control, what are the things I can't, there can be really dire consequences. So in that sense, I don't know, do you have any thoughts about that, on the conversation around like, well, the luxury of self-care, or being able to take a pause, and or being able to change things, like, do you have any thoughts on that kind
Yeah.
of debate, if you will?
Right. And great question. I think it's a really important perspective on this because there is the need to survive in the modern world. And there's all these stressors and responsibilities, to your point. And we're in this moment right now where there is food insecurity, there is money insecurity, there's job insecurity. We're kind of in a pressure cooker in terms of how do we just make it day by day in a world that's becoming more and more expensive. And so I've been thinking about that a lot as well. And I think even despite all those truths, there's
Yeah.
no avoiding that.
Mhm.
We owe it to ourselves, kind of like you were saying, we have to be extra intentional about nourishing ourselves through this because
Mhm.
these are stressors that are impacting our body, whether it's like low grade stress all the time or day after day with major stressors, there is that impact. And so like I said, we're finite and we have to
Yeah.
protect our health at all costs. And
Yeah.
so taking that time to nourish and restore is paramount. Otherwise, we can't keep going.
Yeah.
And we've got a great comment here, like the overstimulation of it all. Absolutely.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
it it has an impact. And so it's about carving out, sometimes 5 minutes can make a difference. If
Yeah.
you've got 5 minutes for meditation or a walk, and we'll talk about some of those things, it can make a difference. So it's a
Mhm.
both and situation. The world is throwing us a lot, and we need to
Yeah.
nurture
Yeah.
ourselves. Hmm.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about, um, we have learned to recognize what burnout looks and feels like. What are some of the, if there's someone out there kind of like not sure, like, oh, I've been stressed my whole life, like, but it's this burnout. What are the common hallmarks and the distinctions, of actual burnout? And in some ways, I think it's like an epidemic of the age we live in now.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point. I in my research of burnout, I read that it is the epidemic of the 21st century. And that was like, oh my gosh, that feels really real and true. If we think about the people in our lives around us, we've seen the impacts of burnouts in our communities. And one stat that's been really telling is 82% of people are at risk of burnout. Like, okay, that's truly the lion's share. This is something that we have to look at.
Mhm.
Burnout is so pervasive that the World Health Organization is like paying attention to it. They're now calling it an occupational phenomenon. And according to them, I like their description of it. There's several hallmarks: cynicism, uh, constant exhaustion, brain fog, which I think is really relatable. They also said like reduction in effectiveness. So kind of just feeling like you're going through the motions, getting to work and not really feeling like you're moving the needle at all. You're just kind of there and you're not
Your
thinking
cup is
clearly.
empty.
Yes, yes. And there's so many symptoms associated with burnout too. I don't want to read off a list necessarily, but I did want to kind of share all these potential symptoms that come from with burnout. Just for those of you out there, if you're like, am I burnt out? Have I been burnt out? If you can recognize any of these in yourself, like this might be a hallmark of burnout. But some symptoms include racing heart, restless sleep. That is a big one.
Yeah.
Anxious thoughts, panic attacks, brain fog. We shared that, digestive issues, headaches, skin
Hmm.
flare-ups, low energy, and just generally feeling on edge and being irritable. And everybody is different too. I'd like to say that,
Yeah.
like,
How it
for
manifests.
exactly, and we all have our unique ways of how it manifests. Those who know me know I get skin flare-ups. I turn red. I have like a pretty intense histamine response, which turns out is genetic. So just I'd like to invite everyone think about, we all know what it feels like to be burnt out, but how does that show up for you? So, and there's a lot of implications to what's going on in the nervous system when we
Mhm.
talk about burnout. So we'll get into that. But those are sort of the main hallmarks of burnout and what it feels like.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about burnout as you can think of it as a phase or a season, but it's also tends to be a cycle, right?
Yes. Yes. Very
Yeah.
much
And
so.
can you speak to kind of that unfortunately cyclical nature of burnout and how it's usually not a quick fix, as you kind of were talking about before?
Right. Absolutely. Burnout doesn't happen overnight. It kind of creeps up on us, and it's pushing past that exhaustion at work one week, and then it's pushing past exhaustion again. And okay, now we're getting into chronic stress mode, and now we're not sleeping well. So that's compounding on everything that we're not getting the proper
Yeah.
restoration at night. And now we're maybe getting into some of these dysfunctional cycles of trying to you know
Deal or
right,
escape.
just coping, exactly,
Yeah.
dealing and coping.
Yeah.
And ultimately it becomes the cycle of like reduced life satisfaction.
Mhm.
The Sunday scaries. I really
Mhm.
used to get that when I worked in the corporate world, like literally crying every
Yes.
Sunday night, like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I
The
have to go back.
dread. Yeah.
Yeah, the dread. So that becomes a cycle, and it's really, you got to throw a wrench in it though, because it's like a snowball. It will compound
Mhm.
and it will get worse, and your body gives us signs. All those symptoms I read off, those are signals from the body. And so one thing that we talked about in the blogs we wrote about this is burnout as a messenger. It can be really
Mhm.
easy to be really mad at your burnout and be like,
Why
I
can't
just
I
wish,
be a machine?
yeah, go away. You're ruining my life. But the burnout and these symptoms associated with it,
Yeah.
it's your
They're
body like
warnings.
wait, exactly,
Yeah.
waving a flag, alarm system, like something has
Mhm.
to change. And so if you
Mhm.
can kind of think about it that way, of this is your body actually trying to tell you that something is wrong.
Trying to help
um,
you,
yeah,
actually.
to help you. It wants
Mhm.
you to thrive. Our bodies want us
Yeah.
to thrive. It's just it might be struggling under the weight that it's
Yeah.
dealing with. Yeah.
And I think more and more, like as technology became more embedded in our life, I think, I mean, this is a generalization, but I think like working culture, business culture expected us to become like machines, like you're always on. And you, as you mentioned in the article, even machines need to power down,
Yes.
sometimes. And so there's this, I think why burnout is so pervasive is because there's become this increasing gap between what we as human bodies and minds are need to be healthy, and what is expected, like these unhuman expectations
Yes.
of productivity, of how we use our attention, of how many physical tasks and projects and things we can actually be responsible for in a effective way. And I think all of that has become so un not just unreasonable, but unsustainable, unrealistic. Uh, But it's only, I think we're the only ones that can determine whether, you know, is the environment I'm in. Like for many people, it's actually like sometimes the corporate environment or a culture that, like you said, when you heard the other woman in the bathroom crying, it's like, oh, there's something toxic
Yeah.
about where I'm at. And so any normal person, you know, will would end up in this place.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And some like workplaces and managers and people in leadership, they're starting to pay attention to burnout a little bit more because
Yeah.
they're noticing there's a cost impact to them.
Yes. Yeah.
World Health Organization said like over $320 billion a year is being spent on the impacts of burnout. And it's like, there's the
Mm-mm.
money aspect, but more important, I think, by far is the human aspect. So suddenly now we're like, they're realizing that for the sake of their businesses that we might need to shift, but don't wait for them to make those decisions. We, can
Yeah.
empower ourselves to make that shift. And societies used to build in rest and restoration in a way that we've kind of done away with. There were Sabbath practices for many religions. Some countries and cultures still have siestas, which I think is
Yes.
fantastic. But in many parts of the West and definitely in America, we have not retained
Mhm.
oftentimes those
Yeah.
moments of rest, and so we have to throw
In
them
fact,
in
we did
ourselves.
the opposite. We stigmatized
Yes,
rest and
yes,
stopping and you know not turning off commercial activity, right?
yes.
You know.
Which is wild. But one thing that, within the conditioning that we've grown up in, where productivity is king and rest might feel guilt-ridden or lazy, one little brain hack that I definitely use is to think of rest as productive.
Yeah.
Just that's the
It's
mantra, rest is
necessary.
productive. It
Yeah.
enables you to come back stronger later. So if
Mhm.
that helps anyone, just definitely wanted to share that. Yes, rest is
Yes.
resistance
Yes. Oh,
too. The
Nat
best
Ministry.
kind.
Shout out to the Nat Ministry. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Um, so let's get into the science of things a little bit.
Cool.
And so we see kind of like the physical, emotional manifestations of burnout, but what is actually going on inside our bodies, like at the nervous system level? What is this chronic, acute level of stress doing to us and our holistic kind of systemic selves?
Right. Great, great, great point to get into. So, I'm going to get into the nervous system a little bit. And this is a buzzword lately. People are talking about the nervous system, and I'm so happy because this is pretty integral to our well-being and health. But, the nervous system does a lot of things. It connects the mind body, it controls basically all these different functions within the body. But there are two main stress response modes of the nervous system. And burnout essentially is just chronic overstimulation of the nervous system.
Yeah.
And it puts us in this place of what's called sympathetic dominance. So we've
Mhm.
got the sympathetic nervous system response. Think of running from a tiger. We
Yeah,
are
classic.
activated. Our heart is racing. Our respiration is quick. Our brow is sweaty. We are in stress mode. And that is really necessary for humans in certain situations, like when we are running from a predator. But in this modern world, we can get stuck there kind of day in and day out and be there somewhat permanently. So the opposite side of that, we talked about sympathetic dominance. There's parasympathetic nervous system mode. And so that is called rest and digest.
Mhm.
Sympathetic is fight or flight. And so there's this dichotomy. Are we in fight or flight, or are we in rest and digest? And the more that we can be in rest and digest or parasympathetic dominance, this is where our body actually is able to thrive. This is where we heal. This is where we get feel good hormones, dopamine, endorphins. And so the longer that we can stay there, the better off that we're going to be. And so just kind of thinking about burnout through that lens, you got to think about the ratio of how often you're in sympathetic nervous system mode versus parasympathetic. And
Yeah.
anything we can do to move to parasympathetic, rest and digest as much as possible can be really beneficial and getting there consistently. And so a little bit, a good way to break down that science a little bit is to think about this question, am I okay? Your
Mm-hmm.
body is asking itself this question all the time. And if it
Mm-hmm.
asks itself, am I okay? No. This is
Mm-hmm.
where we're in sympathetic
Mm-hmm.
nervous system state, fight or flight. If we say, am I okay? Do I feel safe? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That is akin to parasympathetic nervous system state.
And,
So
and
moving toward the yes. Yeah.
would you say your body is not listening to what you say, but what is really present? Because I think a lot of times we can, I mean, a lot of we're kind of conditioned to deny,
Yeah.
and and it's almost like, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine,
Yeah.
but I think our body uh has a really good bullshit meter,
Yes. Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it's like,
It's
oh,
ignoring the
actually, you're
mind.
not okay. Let
Yeah.
me,
It's
yeah,
ignoring the papering over. It's
yeah.
assessing what is really true right now.
Mm-hmm.
What are we up against? And so it's
Mm-hmm.
almost answering that question for itself. So we
Yeah,
might say, "Oh, I feel okay," but the body's going, "I don't feel okay." And so
yeah, yeah.
the central way essentially to move into rest and digest is to do things that allow your body to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Safety is
Mm-hmm.
truly the
Mm-hmm.
key way
Yeah,
to change this ratio
yeah.
and move into parasympathetic dominance where we
And then,
belong.
yeah, and then that sense, it's not as simple or as one dimensional as just like sleeping it off, right? Because rest is one thing, safety is a whole nother
Yeah.
related, but much more profound, maybe even complex condition, you know. I also wanted to ask you about, it's not that we are going to eliminate stress or that we never want any stress, right? Actually, there's healthy stress in our lives, our bodies. We're meant to be able to deal with stress because it helps us build resilience,
Yes.
right? So the goal isn't to remove stress, right? Because we need to be able to handle that in our lives. It's realistic, it's necessary, but it's about the chronic over heightened state of stress to the point where your body doesn't even, it can't even recognize when it's, supposed to react this way. It starts to overreact and it just becomes all out of balance, right?
That's such a great point. Absolutely. So what healthy nervous system, what the ideal looks like is really that ability to be adaptable and jump from
Mhm.
one to the other quickly.
Mhm.
And that's where the endocannabinoid system comes in too, which we'll get into, but that ability to balance and get back to baseline quickly after a stimulus.
And not be stuck in that mode,
Yes.
whether or not your environment requires you to.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. To be able to go back and forth depending on what that moment calls for. And,
Mhm.
after the stressor leaves, it's about getting back to balance and not staying in that
Yeah.
stress mode.
Yeah. So on that topic of balance, ever since humans have been using plants and medicine and even practices and rituals to help calm ourselves, cannabis is probably one of the oldest plant medicines we have, and it's very common for people to use it to unwind and de-stress. But what is that deeper relationship behind why cannabinoids actually can help us not just de-stress but actually regulate and balance our nervous system at that more systemic level?
Yeah, this is central to understanding how hemp can help with burnout recovery. So hemp and CBD and cannabinoids, they modulate or balance the endocannabinoid system, which is this really integral system in our bodies that many of you know, is responsible for homeostasis and balancing the body. So I've heard it described as our SOS mechanism. If something
Mm-mm.
throws the body off balance, it's up to the strength of the endocannabinoid system to bring it back into a balanced state. So we can think of stimuli and then hopefully a quick response. And so the endocannabinoid system, it works with so many systems in our bodies, but when we think about burnout and stress, we can look at what it does for our stress response system, which is
Mm-mm.
called the HPA axis. This is part of the neuroendocrine system. It's got many components, but the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the adrenal glands. So these different parts of our bodies that are regulating and producing hormones that we feel, and it impacts literally our felt experience of what stress feels like. So the endocannabinoid system, the HPA axis, they work together.
Mm-mm.
And what I think is really cool, I was reading about how the HPA axis, these parts of the body, they contain a high density of endocannabinoid receptors. So
Yeah,
even
not surprising.
right. Anatomically, we can see, not with our eyes, but scientists can measure it, how these two systems really talk to each other. So the HPA axis will detect something is wrong. The tiger's chasing me, or I have a paper tiger here. My boss sent an email that stressed me out. But then it's up to the endocannabinoid system to come and help that return to a healthy baseline once again. And
Mm-mm.
so what we can do is improve our endocannabinoid tone through supplementation of hemp and cannabinoids and other things as well.
And we know that in general, like a lot of people use cannabinoids and herbs to help with stress um, and anxiety, but the profile of how what you consume really matters, right? And there can be certain, whether you want to call it a cannabinoid profile or strain or types of products or formulations that can actually be counterproductive.
Yes.
Right. So, can you share a bit about what you've been, working with all types of patients, clients, and seeing a whole spectrum of products? Uh, what are profiles that tend to help manage stress and burnout versus actually could hinder, and be counterproductive?
Absolutely. Fantastic question. Thinking about really, I don't want to, overcoming might be a big word, but mitigating burnout and managing stress. When we think about this, it's about sustainable approaches that will work for the
Mhm.
long term, and things that are consistently things that we can grab and know that they will help. So when it comes to using hemp for burnout, I would definitely recommend minor cannabinoid rich products. So things that are
Mhm.
rich in CBD and CBG. This can help calm the body, improve stress, lift mood, and reduce tension. Um, I love products that have like smaller amounts of THC, microdoses of THC, a little bit for relaxation, a little bit to create to kind of help amplify the other cannabinoids, but not too much THC that it tips us over into anxiety. For
Mhm.
most people, THC, it's biphasic, but it can actually lead to anxiety in high doses. Um,
Yeah,
or
I
just
don't think
regular
anybody would
use.
argue with you on that.
I've experienced it myself. And so we can think about high doses, maybe being anxiety inducing, but also just chronic use. I know a lot of people will reach for that for anxiety, but over time realize that
Mhm.
it's not yielding the results that they ultimately were looking for. And I think, small intentional, um, experiences with this, that's up to people's discretion,
Yeah, and everybody's body reacts differently too, right? Some people require
Absolutely.
a different balance of cannabinoids and herbs. Yeah.
It's true. So yeah, you know your body best. And I think, full THC experience can elicit laughter, which is actually really helpful for stress reduction and even like tonifying the vagus nerve, which is really important for from a nervous system perspective. But yeah, I think just inviting people to audit, like if high THC is part of their regimen, like really assess, is that helping with the stress management or not. So from
Mhm.
my from my cannabis coach experience, putting that hat on, I would definitely recommend minor cannabinoid rich, low THC options for that consistent everyday approach to burnout.
Hmm. Yeah. And then, in our article, you had cited this really interesting study that they did with
Yes.
probably one, like a prime example of people being burnt out, right? Which was healthcare professionals during COVID, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so because we do have, there's an increasing amount of research being done on the relationship between cannabinoids, CBD, THC, and the various health benefits and potential. But whenever we can get a real clinical study like this, it's really helpful. So yeah, what did they find? What did they see?
Yeah, the great point. Yeah, this study really stood out to me. So it was kind of at this apex of stress. Healthcare professionals, which is already an industry that has high rates of stress during the COVID
Yeah.
pandemic, we know that how tough that was on nurses and medical professionals. So they took a cohort, I think it was 120 sample size, and essentially half the group was given CBD, 300
Mhm.
milligrams daily, and
Mhm.
some other helpful health guidance, like get outside more and here's some
Like
educational
lifestyle
videos,
stuff.
lifestyle stuff. And the
Mhm.
other group was just given the lifestyle
Mhm.
guidance. And so then they followed them and tracked them, and they were able to detect quite a bit of improvement with the group that was given the 300 milligrams of CBD daily. So they saw in that group, they saw a 60% drop reduction in anxiety, 50% reduction in depression, and 25% reduction in burnout symptoms, which are measurable, things like heart rate and respiration rate, and et cetera. So I
Mhm.
just thought that was really cool, especially because it is healthcare professionals, but
Yeah.
it gives us some data to put in our back pocket to understand,
Mhm.
wow, CBD and minor cannabinoids really can be helpful when it
Yeah.
comes to burnout.
And we talk in the article too about how, you know, nothing is a silver bullet, right? Even though are starting to have more and more data, of course, a lot of firsthand experience about how it helps, but sometimes the most important thing is that your body needs a way to just like pull it back into a safer place,
Yes,
right? And kind of calm the storm so that you can then from that more calm place work on the more longer term requirements of ending the cycle, right?
exactly.
So I think it's important to acknowledge, right? Like if anyone's telling you just doing this one thing or taking this one thing is just gonna like magically remove all your stress problems or your burnout problems, that's I would be very skeptical, right? And the same goes for cannabinoids. But the key thing is, how do we build our own toolkit of things that we can have control over, that we can do for ourselves in the moment or proactively, that gets us out of this kind of like panic, constant panic emergency mode, where we oftentimes start to not even be able to make good decisions because everything is out of whack.
Yes, that's a great point. Absolutely. It's not the whole piece of how to solve this, but it's a wonderful and accessible first step.
Yeah,
And
that's a
from
really
like
good point.
a wellness coach perspective, like one thing that's really worked well is getting a client started with CBD so they can start feeling that initial relief and start feeling better. And now we've opened up space in their life. And with
Hmm.
that space, now
Hmm.
we can start chasing after a lot of the other lifestyle foundations, better sleep, more
Hmm.
movement, better nutrition, things like this. So starting with hemp and planning to continue on down your wellness journey is a great approach. And I think it's really
Yeah.
applicable for burnout recovery. Yeah.
And I feel a lot of a lot of people are turning to this. First of all, like you said, it's one of the few things that is actually effective but accessible,
Yes.
right? And that a lot of um a lot of options out there that to maybe pharmaceutical things, they can end up making solving one problem, but then a lot of people don't feel like themselves anymore,
Yes.
and that's also not a long-term solution either. And so the beauty of a lot of plant medicines often is that they they work in harmony with our body, right? And they don't come with a lot of the unwanted side effects, right? And sometimes they take longer. They work more slowly. But I think any integrative or herbal medicine practitioner will tell you that fixing a problem as deep as burnout, it shouldn't be a quick fix, right? If it's truly going to be sustainable, it shouldn't be a quick fix. But like you said, how do we act? But how do we get ourselves off of like the burning ship first,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. And beyond just we've been talking a lot about cannabinoids, but there are also a lot of other types of herbs and plant medicine that people have relied on, many cultures have relied on for thousands of years. And so, shall we explore like some of them we use in our formulations, um, and that was a result of working directly with actual physicians, naturopaths, people that are formally trained and clinically trained in using plant medicine. And so, for instance, ashwagandha is one of the herbs that we have in daily defense. The I always just use the green one because we use the color coding to be simpler. But ashwagandha belongs to a larger category of herbs called adaptogens. So yeah, can you? It's becoming more and more of a buzzword, I think, as
Yes.
of late. Like what do we know about this category of adaptogens and why they're helpful?
Yes. Yeah, adaptogens, they're trending, but for good reason. They can be
Yeah.
really helpful for restoring balance in the body. So they are different from cannabinoids. Like you said, it's a classification of herbs, but in a lot of ways, the results are somewhat similar. So um, it sounds familiar when you think about what adaptogens do, but they can
Yeah.
help regulate cortisol. Essentially, they're really good at giving us that resilience against
Mhm.
stressors. They also have great modulation of the immune system, so help you prevent sickness and illness, and they can also lower inflammation. And there's other downstream effects, like they're supportive for sleep and mood and things like this. So,
A lot of beautiful, I think in some
synergy.
ways they overlap, right? So
Yeah.
like cannabinoids are also highly anti-inflammatory, right? But then they're also complementary. So there's this beautiful, um, people that are familiar with the world of cannabinoids know about this concept of the entourage effect, right? Where when you have more than just one cannabinoid or compound, right? When it's not just CBD, but it's CBD with THC, with CBG, CBN, the acidic forms, they work better together. And I think non-cannabinoid herbs are an extension of that principle, where it's like there are also herbs that when you combine them with cannabinoids, they all reinforce each other. They work better together. And there's a harmony there when you pick the right ones to combine that not only give you better results, but you need less to
Yes.
accomplish your goal, which is always good for your body too, right? You want the minimal amount that gives you maximum benefit.
Yes. I think that's such a good way to put it. And in terms of the adaptogens, like uh, Dr. Sunil Agrawal, who's at Ames Institute, who Polite partners with, he put it in a way that really has spoken to me as simple, but he says
Mhm.
adaptogens help you roll with the punches of life. And it's
Yes,
like,
yes,
okay, that's what we need when it comes to stress management and burnout. And
yeah,
and then paired with the cannabinoids, it's this beautiful synergy. The iconic or iconography of the daily defense formula is a little shield. And so I think we can think of that as like a shield against burnout, a shield
yeah,
against stress,
yeah.
protecting ourselves.
Mhm. There's other, common herbs like lemon balm and kava, which we have in our Ease Your Mind, like our stress formulation. But we were at a recent women's health event. We met your friend who's an herbalist, and she
Yes.
was talking about lemon balm too, right? So yeah,
Yes.
do you have any uh knowledge around, why has this always been a trusted herb for stress too?
That's so great. Yeah, Erica, shout out to Erica. I think she's watching. She's a trained herbalist, and we were talking about how can we naturally calm the body, and we came with some Ease Your Mind, and she came with some lemon balm in her tea. So that's so funny. Yeah, it's something that people have been using for millennia to naturally calm the body down. I know a lot of people who do home gardens and grow their own herbs in their own gardens. That's a really beneficial one that people will always grow year after year so that they can naturally calm themselves down. And so I think, thinking about what Daily Defense does for us, it's kind of like this strengthen vibe. And then when we think about Ease Your Mind with the lemon balm and the kava, it's like softening the body. So
Mm-hmm.
allowing us to maybe be in that hyper stress state and come down to baseline and a natural state of calm without being
Mm-hmm.
sedated, which is really great
Yes,
about
yeah.
lemon balm. Yeah.
And I love that, because often you think of strong and soft being opposites, but
Hmm.
in fact, we want both, right?
Yes. Think
And
about
some
women. Women are
exactly,
both. Yeah.
and when you learn more about like the body, you learn that like you actually don't want your muscles to be like overly strong, because you need some flexibility. You actually need some softness to have resilience, and because I think a lot of times we think of strong and soft being um, in conflict, but we actually want to embody both, right? Um, and so I think the way that these plant medicines work in our body are the same. They're extremely powerful, but they're also gentle,
Yes.
right?
And effective.
And and
Yeah.
we've also, I think we've been conditioned to also think that that's not possible, but it actually is, and it's actually what our bodies want,
Yes.
right? Instead
Yes.
of things that may strengthen us, but be very harsh on our mind and our body.
Right.
Um, let's see. What about so we've talked about, cannabinoids, herbs, figuring out the right combinations for your own body and how and how it reacts to make sure that you're not doing anything counterproductive, right?
Right.
Um, and so a lot, nowadays we live in the age of like yoga and meditating and like um Wim Hof, like breathing, like cold plunge. There's always kind of this like uh practice of the moment, that but what are things that we can add to our toolkit beyond just what we consume, you know?
Yes. That's a great question. And I love talking about these things too, because some of them cost some money, like a yoga class costs money, but a lot of these things that we can do to naturally calm the nervous system, other than hemp and herbs, they're free and accessible and widely available to us. So it's good. I kind of break them down into two categories. So we've got lifestyle foundations. And so focusing there for a moment, this is things like improving our sleep. This
Mhm.
is like
Yeah.
the sleep is the ultimate burnout buffer. We all know how it feels to not be sleeping well and how that impacts our performance and just kind of leads to more burnout. Moving the body is incredibly important. So whatever movement practice feels right and joyful to your body is
Mhm.
great. That's truly how we close the stress cycle is to move. If we
Yeah.
are stressed in sympathetic nervous system state, through movement, we can move to
Mhm.
rest and digest again. So
I think
any
that's
somatic
really
practice.
important to emphasize. And we both read this book about burnout, actually, because we needed it in our own lives. But I think that was one of my takeaways, that oftentimes you think fixing burnout is almost like a mental thing where it's like, oh, I need to like, sit in silence or meditate. And that book really showed us that no, it's a physical process.
Yes.
Like, so
Absolutely.
whether that's, screaming or like running or playing sports or sweating it out or dancing or talking, that if we don't also pair the inner kind of mental ways of processing stress in our lives, we also have to pair it in very physical, tangible ways, like to literally work it out and
Absolutely.
work it through our bodies.
Work it
So I
through.
think that's something I did not realize for a lot of my life. And then when I started um, making a more conscious effort to actually like exercise and move. Um, I think that really helped.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's key. Think of like how animals are so attuned to nature and sort of instinctively know what their bodies need. If a
Mhm.
dog is chased or something, kind of scary happens to a dog, they will shake it out. We see that all the time. So
Yeah,
humans
yeah,
are the same. We need to know
yeah.
to
And I
move
think
in some
kids
capacity.
do it
Little
naturally too,
kids,
right?
they know instinctively. We just kind of
Yeah,
forget when we're plugged into
yeah.
all
Or
the
it
matrix.
gets stigmatized. It's like you, as an adult, you feel weird if you're, like dancing your stress out. But
Yes,
actually, that's kind of how we were made,
yes, very
to
key.
help ourselves. Yeah.
So another lifestyle foundation too is just this is a broad one, but social connection. Humans
Mhm.
really need social connection to feel that safety.
Yeah.
We safety in community, safety in safe spaces. So laughter, hugs, these things really do help actually scientifically improve the health of our vagal tone, our nervous system in general. So
Mhm.
making sure to build that in. So there's lifestyle foundations, and you can learn more about those in the blogs that we've generated. Then there's also other external nervous system supporting practices. So yoga, like you said, yoga is a great one, a somatic practice that moves us from the state of overthinking into the present moment, which is
Mhm.
where we can truly find peace and ease and balance is in the present moment. Breath work is fantastic. That also has the capacity to improve your vagal tone, move you to parasympathetic state, that rest and digest. So that's really beneficial. There's things like sauna and contrast therapy that can be really helpful. Walking, that is one of my favorites, just
Yeah.
taking
We
a
shared
walk.
that.
Yeah, you and I both like
Mhm.
daily walkers.
Mhm.
I know that's so important to both of us. It's
It's
my
like it's
non-negotiable.
medicine too.
It's
Yeah, I
truly
think it's
medicine.
become, and I think the key thing is like, whatever you can do, given the reality of your day, of your life, I think even small acts of taking care of your body and prioritizing it. I think it's part of that conversation with your body to tell it that, hey, I want you to feel safe, and so I am choosing to just spend this 5 minutes before I open my computer for you, for us, for me. I think those small things, if that's all we can manage, make a difference, right? And again, signaling to our body that like I'm trying to take care of you.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
the exhale of life.
Yeah.
There's so much inhale and input and stimulation. It's the exhale, taking that time to let go and release and just
Yes.
be
Yeah.
for a moment. Very key.
I know we're almost up at time. One last thing that I wanted to touch on was, um, we talked about kind of like plant medicine and practices as their individual benefits. But at the end of the day, I think the goal is to think about how we combine all these things um, as a routine. Some people may even call it like a ritual. And when it comes specific to cannabinoids, a lot of people ask about like, how do you actually combine use? Because I maybe for many years in my life I only did it this one or two ways at certain moments, but I think a lot of people don't realize how, from a therapeutic perspective, you can be very strategic and intentional about when and how you use what and how you combine things.
Yes.
So can you share about like as a cannabis coach, like what have you found are the different ways and moments that people can actually be more strategic about how and when they use plant medicine?
Yes, great. Absolutely. So, certainly there's different approaches to dosing, and just calling out that this might look different every day or different seasons of one's life. And do have a great graphic on this in the blog post if you need a bit of a reminder. But there's kind of three main classifications of how you can approach this. So the first is regular maintenance. So if you have found a dose of cannabinoids and herbs that works for you, and you know that it's making your body feel better, making that daily ritual, taking it
Mhm.
regularly as your
Like
wellness
a
support.
vitamin kind of,
Like a
right?
vitamin,
Mhm.
absolutely. Building it into your morning routine, things like this. Then the next classification is like anticipatory dosing. So if you've got a big work presentation or something coming up, this morning I took Ease Your Mind, right? So that I'm calm and steady to share all this. So
Or if you
anticipating an
have to,
event,
yeah, if you have to meet that really stressful relative or person,
holidays.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. So thinking ahead and being like, I know that a trigger for me is coming. How can I take this anticipatorily to make myself balanced for that moment? And then
mhm,
the final category is rescue relief. So if you're feeling symptoms, if you're in a panic attack, if you are in a fully stressed moment, taking cannabinoids, the right approach for you, the right formula for you, so that you can return to baseline. And you don't have to pick one category and stick with it. You can layer these things all together. You can have your daily cannabinoid routine and then pepper in anticipatory use, rescue relief use as needed to keep yourself balanced and humming along.
yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget, right? Like either we only use it as a rescue, or we only use it as maintenance, and then we forget that no, it's a dynamic tool, that can be used in different ways and can be combined in different ways.
Right.
Yeah. Uh, Okay, just so I know time is up. I always want to talk forever to you,
Same.
but maybe just to bring it home. We in the beginning we talked about like, okay, when was that aha moment where you realized as an adult, like, oh, this is what burnout feels like? On the other end of that, what is something you've been able to integrate into your life that has helped you be um, better and more resilient, at either avoiding burnout or just learning to know the signs of it earlier.
Yeah, that's great. I'll share a couple quickly. Walking, like we said, that is my daily non-negotiable. It's a little hard now that we're entering the big dark, but any day where it's not raining, I'm out there for that walk. I'm always watching the weather. When
Yeah,
can I get out
same.
there? That is when I release, and it's a good opportunity to, listen to a podcast you love or something that's unrelated to work or responsibilities and brings an element of play in there and also gets you in nature. It's also really important. And then for me, kind of just blocking out my time is something that's become increasingly important to me, especially for me. I've been in head injury recovery the last couple years. So
Yeah,
taking a slower pace on life in general has helped me to kind of calm the fire of burnout. And so, I need 2 or 3 nights a week where I'm doing absolutely nothing so I can just eat dinner with my husband and paint and, get that walk in. So just being really dedicated about keeping those boundaries on my time has been helpful. Yeah.
yeah,
Any that you want to share that are, I'd
yeah.
love
I
to
think there's
hear.
two. The first one is about. I had to really rethink my relationship with resting, and like we were saying, right, I think there's a lot of maybe self-inflicted like stigma on like, oh, if I take a nap during the day, like I'm being lazy, or when in some cultures, like I think I've shared before, when I lived in China, it's very normal after lunchtime, an office worker, they will nap at their desk, and everybody does it. It's almost like in preschool, right? It's like you have the like collective nap time, and it's normal. So but I think I had to come around in just giving myself permission to rest during the day if I'm tired, instead of doing it but then feeling guilty about it, and just accepting that no, this is actually a positive thing, that I have a right to let myself do. um and so it's just kind of removing the guilt from letting yourself rest. And
Nice.
then the second thing is learning how to not check my phone and email uh, the first thing you do when you wake up,
Yep.
right? Because I think when you do that, you immediately start thinking about like all the things you have to answer, all the questions that people are asking you, and I haven't done this, and again, it's not about ignoring reality. Like there's always to dos, but if that's the first thing you do in your day, and if that's the first thing you give your energy to, you're just, you know diving into the sinkhole, right?
Yes.
And over the past few years, I've learned to kind of like almost delay that as much as I can and try to take some ownership of the morning for myself. You know, whether that's just like 5 minutes to have a cup of tea before I have to start things, or sometimes it's, you know, going sneaking in a walk, or I shouldn't say sneaking in, right? Because that implies that we're doing something we're not supposed to do. But, you know, making it a priority, right? To do something for yourself, whether it's small or big or frequent or infrequent, before you open the gates of the whole, all the demands, you know,
Yes. Set the
and all
tone
the
for the
to-dos.
day. Right.
Protect that for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, uh, on that note, Heather, thank you so much. And thank
Thank
you for
you.
saving the day because I technologically am always, you know, um,
It worked out.
challenged. And so, yeah, I think this is a topic we'll continue to learn about for ourselves. But hopefully this was helpful for everybody. And a reminder to read the amazing content that and the research that Heather had put together to help people kind of dig beyond the surface of what burnout really is and how we can break the cycle. Um, and hopefully you all join us for our next polite conversation. And you can always ask us questions, ask Heather questions, share what's worked for you, right? Whether it's through plant medicine or other things in your life. But thank you everybody who joined and who's watching this later on.
Thank you all. Great chatting with you all today. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.